Hello, friends, enemies, those still under review. The fucking Dutch. Am I right? I'll be here all week. Anyway, today we're going to talk about the admittedly very misleading title, How I Became Pharaoh of Egypt. Now let me explain. I is the way you pronounce his name. It is spelled A-Y. I. If any of you have watched the movie Peabody and Sherman, he is. There's a joke about it. He says, I am I. Anyway, so I. He is from a random place. So, hold on. Let me get into the context. These things are not planned, and it shows. Anyway, let's get to the context. During this time in Egypt's history, you have the Pharaoh. His name is Akhenaten. Now, Akhenaten wanted to get rid of all of Egypt's old gods and replace them with one called Aten. Aten was, but before Akhenaten, Aten was just, he was the sun that you see in the sky. He was nothing else. He wasn't the god of the sun. He wasn't the it wasn't like he was Apollo, Helios, Hyperion. He just was the thing you saw in the sky. Ra was still the god of the sun. Now, so Akhenaten, we don't really know why he wanted Aten to be the only god. And initially, he didn't get rid of all of the other gods. He just said that Aten was the supreme god. It used to be Amun-Ra, but now it is Aten. And that was kind of hard to swallow for some Egyptians, but they went along with it. He's a pharaoh. He does what he wants. And then he said, no, Aten is the only god there is. So Akhenaten gets rid of all of the gods. And he reigns for about 16-ish years. And then we have chaos. So Akhenaten is married to a woman named Nefertiti. Yes, her name is funny. Now, Nefertiti maybe becomes pharaoh after him. The pharaoh after him is Neferu Pharaoh Aten, which could be Nefertiti. And then there is a person named Smenkhara after Neferu Pharaoh Aten. Now, we don't know. So, Smenkhara and Neferu only reigned for about 2 years combined. So, we don't know a whole lot about them. And then, after Smenkhare and Neferu we have Tutankhaten. Now, let's get to I. Now, I is from a random place in the middle of Egypt, and he eventually rises through the ranks of the Egyptian government, basically, and eventually he ends up becoming basically the position right below a general. It would have been called the Master of Horses, basically, and because all of the rich people who were in the army rode chariots pulled by horses, it was a very powerful position. So eventually, he ends up becoming a trusted advisor to Akhenaten. Now, in this power struggle, I basically becomes the one in charge. So let's go to Tutankhaten. Now, Tutankhaten is probably the son of Nefertiti and Akhenaten. Now, his name might sound familiar because he is King Tut. So, his name, as we know it, is King Tutankhamun, which means something along the lines of glory to Amun. Now, what his name used to be was glory to Aten, Tutankhaten. Then he changed it to Tutankhamun. So King Tut got rid of worship of Aten. And when I say King Tut, I mean I being the 40-year-old man and leader of the army and the government, told King Tut, preteen and powerless Pharaoh, bring back the gods or I will put someone else in your place, basically. Now, so I rules through King Tut, basically. And during this time period, during King Tut's reign, you have this weird thing where, technically speaking, they haven't abandoned Ottonism. Not entirely, but they have definitely said other gods exist. And they have definitely said that he is not the supreme god. Now, one of the main reasons they did this is because the most powerful people in Egypt were the high priest of Amun. They had all of the wealth, they had the backing of the army, so much power. And if they kept pissing off the high priest of Amun, eventually he would do something about it. And they wouldn't like how. So they basically said Amun-Ra is the supreme deity again. Now, when King Tut dies at around the age of 19, we don't really know what he died of. He seemed to have a lot of genetic issues that might have led to an early death, but we're not certain. Anyway, we're fairly certain he had no children. That's almost a guarantee. So I basically just becomes Pharaoh. Like, there's no longer the edge of, oh, King Tut's the Pharaoh, but I's the guy in charge. No, I becomes the Pharaoh of all of Egypt. Now, this man, who's in his, early 50s, mid 50s, something like that, has spent his whole life grasping for power. He started off as somewhat of a lowly peasant, probably wasn't, tilling the fields, but he did start off with a huge advantageous position. So he starts off from there and is now the Pharaoh. For 4 years. He lasts 4 years on the throne before dying. Now, I dies, and he probably had children. We're not really sure, because those children never saw the fucking throne. What happens after I dies is one of the powerful generals named Horemheb basically seizes power and installs himself as the new pharaoh. Horemheb was a general. We know for a fact that he was from the lower classes. He made a huge thing about being part of the lower class. Anyway, so Horemheb basically looks at all of the chaos of Akhenaten's reign, his son, and he's like, no, I don't think so. So what he does is Horemheb tears down all of the temples to Aten, erases all of the mentions of Smenkhare, Akhenaten, Neferuaten, Tutankhaten, and He gets rid of all 5 of those pharaohs. Now, I'd like to mention, that is a period of history of about 35 years. So, instead of going from instead of going from Akhenaten's father, Thutmose III, to Akhenaten, to Neferuaten, to Smenkhare, to Tutankhamun, to it now went from Thutmose III to Horemheb. Nothing in those 35 years happened. And that's kind of what we thought for a very, very long time. We had no clue the Akhenaten existed. We found Tutankhamun, his discovery is a huge thing in in Egyptology, because we didn't know he existed, right? It's not that oh, we found a pharaoh, that's cool. It's we found a pharaoh who has no father, no sons, no mention anywhere. Until we found a bunch, and I'm talking hundreds, of clay tablets in the sand near Akhenaten's capital. Akhenaten built his whole capital. It's a whole thing. I don't have time to get into it. So we found like 450 something tablets just in the sand talking about his reign. And these were so what Horemheb did is he basically took clay tablets and just strick off what was written and replaced his own name there. Like if it was something good that Akhenaten did. No, Akhenaten? Who? I think you mean Horemheb. So Horemheb basically took credit for all the things Akhenaten did and erased all of the things that he didn't like. Aten doesn't exist. Not a thing. You're imagining the last 200 years of Aten being a god. Doesn't exist. Anyway. Fuck, where was I? So yeah, we didn't know about this entire period of history. These whole 35 years. So when we find these, they're called the Amarna tablets, named after Akhenaten's capital. It was called Amarna, or it's called Amarna now. When we find these, it's basically like a whole new level was unlocked. We had no clue about any of this shit. The most we knew was King Tut, King Tutankhamun. And then these tablets detail a whole lot of shit, like Akhenaten went on a daily procession throughout his capital in order to mimic the rising and setting of the sun. Who fucking writes that shit down? Oh yeah, there goes the Pharaoh riding around on his golden chariot to mimic the rising and setting of the sun. Write that shit down, unnamed Egypt person. But yeah, I don't know. It's fun. I love Egyptian history. It's so much fun. I might do another of these. I might actually talk about Horemheb. He's strangely kind of cool. And then Horemheb leads into all of the fucking Ramses. Like, have you all seen The Prince of Egypt? You know how his name is Ramses? There's fucking 11 of those fuckers, and they all come from, they all result from Horemheb. Without Horemheb, we don't have the 11 Ramses. And actually, only the first two are part of the same dynasty. The next 9 aren't. They're kind of related, but not really. It's not father to son. It's a whole thing. And then there's Ramses the 11th, who has a Renaissance period, but that really means rebirth in a bad sense. Anyway, I can't keep talking, or else I'm just not gonna stop. Have fun, stay classy, and god damn, I really need a Danny Moda Epic the Musical reaction.